talk and be more engaging. There's some pictures that I would like to put up, but then I wouldn't be able to refer to my notes. And it's helpful to have notes because there's so much to share. And I know in the title of this talk, I've got like 3 kind of big categories. They're all connected, of course: DNA, Great Awakening, disclosure. And I have, can you all hear me okay? I have some new disclosures and things I've never shared before, and things that really confirmed my intuition about things related to what took place in Eisenhower's administration. So I look forward to sharing it. And I just want to thank you all so much for being here. It's so great to be live again. And yeah, it's just like amazing. And in my excitement, and I think I got like a Whole Foods like reishi mushroom sort of coffee drink, and I think I drank it at like 4 p.m. and I could not sleep last night. So if I seem a little bit like, what? I'm like in that like blissful state of a little bit of sleep deprivation, but I got a lot to share, but maybe I'll talk a little slower. And just processing so much. It's just amazing. So I'm just gonna get my slides up on the screen, and I hope everybody's been having a wonderful event. And I know we've all been through a lot in the last year or two, and everybody's kind of going through things in their own kind of way. And it's just so important that we, build community and support one another, and our differences in the way we perceive things. We really need to embrace the diversity of perception and not allow divide and conquer to get the best of us, because a lot of things can come into the mix in order to try and achieve that. And so we kind of always get a mixture of a bit of psyops with, actual events that are happening, because it's not like, oh, it's all fake and it's a hoax. I'm not going to go on that route, but there's also, there's something else going on, and I'm not going to focus on that. I'm going to more just bring it back into what's really available and why this time period has been somewhat targeted, but why it's also a challenge that we can face and overcome, because in the face of adversity, we grow. We can call upon our divine treasures. We can begin to access things that maybe we're unconscious because we're being pushed to the edge, we're being challenged. So challenge sometimes is necessary. And so if we can stay out of the fear and the victimhood or whatever it is, and really realize what's available, we can utilize this adversity to initiate ourselves to the next level of what this particular window period is all about. Window period that many call ascension. Sometimes that word gets a little confusing to the point where it's like, don't even want to use that word anymore, because in certain words it's just like, oh God, that word again. But I kind of define it in the way that you'll see in the presentation, and I kind of still use the word because it's just been such a part of what I've been speaking about since I first came out, that to kind of like abandon ship on that word, would be a little bit weird, especially when I refer a lot to the Ascension Glossary from Lisa Renee. And it's just amazing. I've known her since 2011. I'm actually in her Ascension Glossary, and every time we talk, we are on like these epic conversations. Last one was like 8 hours long, and so the reason I quote her a lot is because we've really been working together for so many lifetimes, and have this like affinity and sort of agreement about certain things. She's even like, you don't even have to quote me. The Guardians, like, this is your information. This is universe, and like, you've been doing this your whole life and for many lifetimes. But I always have to give credit where credit's due, and I think that's very important. So also some of my information comes from Keylontic Science and just a lifelong mission starting from childhood. It's like, maybe some water would be cool. It sound like, it's not like I smoke a lot of cigarettes or something, which I don't. Life experience, soul journey, realizations and epiphanies along the way. My background as far as education, after not really attending school and having like the worst attendance in my high school, was, wilderness expedition leadership, and that was everything to me. I was very self-taught, with things like tarot, astrology, centering on medical astrology, not so much predictive astrology, but just ways to really understand ourselves, discover self-knowledge. And then the I Ching, I pretty much memorized that book, just working with it so much. And then just, being in the wilderness, just really feeling into the mission and calling, and kind of like finding myself outside of just the weirdness of just seeing through a lot of the programmings and distortions and just the way we're raised, and just like, wait a second, what about this? What about that? Why isn't this included? Why are people that can't sit still like labeled? And why yeah, I think you all kind of like can relate. And if you can't, maybe the awakening happened a little bit later. But it's easy to just kind of like carry a lot of these stigmas, but then kind of have to laugh about it and just know that as things unfold, it's just like, yeah, I knew like something back then, and maybe that was good that I didn't pay attention. And but at the same time, those that did pay attention gained a lot of incredible skills that can begin to be integrated into this greater knowledge and awareness. And that's a really good skill to have honed and developed. So there's not like one better way to get to the goal that we all, I feel, have in our hearts to reach together. As far as like unity consciousness and just moving into higher earth energies, protecting future generations, and really like advancing ourselves in the face of the challenges that are presented to us. So cosmic mythology studies, is there? Okay, I mean, it's not bad. It's on. I mean, it's like, it's going to tune up the room. It's like, sounds like a sound healing thing. So that's nice. But, so yeah, so going to events for the last decade, whistleblower testimony, and doing just a lot of research, especially after I was recruited to go off planet in 2006. Before I ran into Project Camelot and other whistleblowers connected to the secret space program, I learned a lot firsthand about what's going on in the shadow governments. I was never in the projects, I wasn't MyLabbed, but I was recruited and targeted before birth to be led on a timeline I didn't want to go on. I didn't want to go to Mars, but they presented it to me in a way that was like, oh no, it's for your protection in the event of global catastrophes. And I was already privy to things like HARP and chemtrails and geoengineering, and it's like, we don't need to evacuate Mother Earth. And if there is a sort of Armageddon scenario, wouldn't it be maybe engineered, like an artificial timeline? You know, and that kind of information really started to hit me. And I'm like, you can't convince me. I've been downloaded my mission since I was a child. I'm not leaving Mother Earth. And and you guys aren't really talking to me directly. They were talking through a partner they set me up with. They used Looking Glass Technologies to locate us in a past life so that I would immediately have an affinity for him. And it would be like, oh yeah, you know, they're just going to fall in love, and he's going to be like, we need to go to Mars. And of course, if she's in love, she's going to want to go to Mars with him. It's like, didn't really work. And of course, we did have that affinity, and I thought we were just meeting in an organic way. Because I ran into him in a festival after I just kind of gave up because these control forces and psychotronic weapons were really trying to control my life, that I just said, all right, take me to whatever this is. And after my twins were born and I was pretty much raising them on my own, I just felt compelled to just, you know, go to a little festival after moving back home to my mom in the DC area in Charlottesville, Virginia, and just kind of camping. And this man kind of approached me, and I thought he was just hanging out, and it was just like, hey, you know, and we hung out all night and had a great time. And then he started visiting me in the basement of my mother's house. That was sort of a converted apartment for me and my kids. And he was like, yeah, I'm going to these secret meetings, you know, with this group called the Aviary. And I'm like, what's that all about? And then he was starting to tell me about the Mars thing. So I thought I had a choice. I could just say no. Like, okay, well, that's cool that you're doing that, but I might not want to go with you. After we kind of got married and he kind of dropped the subject, realizing that I was getting all like, no, I got a mission here. Like, we're not going anywhere. But if you want to go eventually, I might need to let you go. But we have this great affinity, so we got a lot to work out. And the subject kind of like fell away. And he's just like, don't tell anybody. I'm like, well, really? Okay, all right. This is really secret. Anyway, 6 months into the relationship, he undid all the electronics so that he could tell me something without being bugged, because we were being like tracked and bugged. And he actually would go on missions and not remember. He would get phone calls and just disappear for a couple days and not even remember where he went. He was having abduction experiences and this and that. But eventually he confessed to me that I was a mission, that they tracked me and they had him come to the festival where I was to be bait to get me to go to Mars. I'm like, what? We didn't meet in the organic way and like fall in love and just had this like great chemistry and like playing drums by the, that was all like, you were on a mission and you didn't tell me. And he's like, well, you know, just, I'm dealing with this group. And, you know, he was like, kind of like in his, I think, more soul-centered persona, because it was clear that he had like kind of alters. He was referring to handlers all the time. And these are people that are kind of well-known that have cover occupations, but it's the Aviary. And I just was like, whoa. He's like, well, I'm like, I can't do this. He's like, well, they're going to take you anyway. And then he put all the stuff back together and then denied that he had said anything. And before that, I actually had a dream, and this is why it all had to come out of the bag. that I was being taken up into a ship, and I had a choice. The voice from the sky said, "You want to go with them, or you want to stay on Earth?" And I said, "Well, I want to stay on Earth." And the voice from the sky, which, oh God, is like, "You have a choice." And I'm like, "Well, of course I'm going to stay on Earth." And they're like, "Well, you're not going to be able to be with him." I'm like, "I'm not going to be able to convince him." They're like, "No, you have to make this choice and deal with, whatever heartbreak comes along with it kind of deal." Not necessarily verbatim, but anyway, I'm like, so I crashed back down into the ocean. I could feel it, the temperature of the ocean. And because I'd been taken up by chains. So that was kind of symbolic of, this is probably not just for my protection. It's like something about using and controlling me and creating this facade to make me think, oh yeah, it's for my protection. And that's the way they manipulate well-intentioned people, to try and like pump you up like this is a really good thing. This is different than like an MK Ultra program or like trauma-based mind control. It's a different kind of manipulation. And so I landed back in the water. Then I was like, but I need to just tell him. So I shoot back up into the sky, and there's lightning and thunder, and it's like you can't access them. They're going without you. And then I was like, okay, I made my decision, and I swum to the shore, and the sky filled with light, and there was all these planetary alignments, and the voice said, "You made the right choice." And I woke up, and I said to the partner, "Oh my God, you got to hear this dream I just had." And I told him. He's like, "You shouldn't have told me this." He's like, "They didn't expect you to have some kind of experience that determined that you would make this kind of choice." He's like, "You shouldn't have told me that." And that's when everything unraveled. I was able to escape it, and I got my kids out of there, and it took everything out of me, and the targeting never stopped. But they didn't want me to out them publicly, which I did, but I didn't want to make them the enemy either, because there's a lot of compartmentalism, and they use people. But they wanted to kind of look like, we're cool with her. We weren't just going to take her to Mars. This is all like, and I'm like, I don't want to do anything with you publicly. Anyway, they're called the Aviary. And you can look it up. John Alexander, Hal Puthoff, folks like that. And they have code names like Penguin. And my partner was called Golden Eagle. They had pulled him in as somebody who was going to have artificial telepathy to be convinced that he was the head of this Mars mission. And I knew it was artificial telepathy. I knew this was a MyLab thing, but there was no proof. So I had to dig. And I finally was able to connect the dots. And this website wasn't put out until years later, where I was like, yes, it confirmed it. Because sometimes you question yourself. I'm like, or did they clear their past? And, it's like, but then John Alexander and all these other people. So, Penguin, Chicken Little, so, and then they have the aquarium. And there was one defector that helped me to understand why I was targeted. And it had to do with removing me from the Earth so I wouldn't do my mission here. And it had to do with hijacking our sacred union energies to take to Mars. And he tried to really spell it all out. And it also had to do with the Eisenhower administration and alternatives 1, 2, and 3. Alternative 3 having to do with Mars colony, and 3 alternatives in the event of global catastrophe. And of course there's a potential of global catastrophe. Maybe the Earth naturally cleansing itself or doing whatever it needs to do. But most of this, it was obvious, was going to be engineered. And so that was like a huge deal. And then I was like, whoa, okay, I'm glad I trusted my intuition. And my boys were really young at the time, and they went through all of it. And yeah, there was webcams, we were being tracked, and it was just a lot to overcome. But me beginning to out it and talk about it was like the greatest protection I could have, because as long as I wasn't speaking about it, they really were like, okay, she's vulnerable, nobody's going to take her seriously, nobody's really talking about this. But then boom, we hear whistleblowers like Andrew Bashagos, who he connected dots. He said they were talking about you in 1972, a year before you were born, and pre-targeted you before birth to steer you onto this timeline. But there's also a benevolent side to it that wants you to run as my vice president in one of the elections. So I'm like, that's going to be crazy if I'm anywhere near the White House. It's just like, so it hasn't quite manifested yet, but we're going to be in touch, and we're going to do an interview soon. So he was part of Project Pegasus. And the target date for the recruitment was 2012, where we were going to take these arcs to go off to Mars. And because I was able to get out of it, the events and the opportunities to speak started to come up. And so Star Knowledge invited me on June 5th, I believe it was 2011, to speak about the Venus transits and ascension and all this kind of stuff. And I walked into the health food store, and somebody's like, yeah, we have a telescope right out at the College of Siskiyou, and we're going to look at the telescope and see the Venus transit going across the sun. Do you want to come? Randomly. I didn't even know the person. It had nothing to do with the event. So I go there. College of the Siskiyou, where the Mars training program was in Mount Shasta area. And Weed, California is where there is a teleportation technology at McLeod Market that Andrew Bashagos talks about. So I'm standing there where this Mars training program was with Barry Soetoro, Regina Dugan, and a whole bunch of other people that were with Andrew Bashagos that they were grooming to go to Mars and also to be future presidents that he tried to and has been a whistleblower of. So I'm standing there, I'm supposed to be on Mars, but here I am watching the Venus transit right on top of where the training program was, where they were using these technologies to pull me into it that they were already aware of, that I was like, I can't believe I'm witnessing the transit, because if anybody has seen my presentations, I talk a lot about the Venus transits. My whole chart is like Venus, Scorpio, Mega Libra, just the Venus, Pluto kind of archetype is really strong in me. And I've just shed a lot of light on the mother energy and the Sophionic corrections and what this ascension window is about. So around the date that I was supposed to be on Mars, it was just so symbolic to be standing there, realizing like I made it, and I'm witnessing this, and I'm seeing it, and feeling the energy of it. And then I did like 6 hours of talks, and it was one of like the first events that I ever did. So the reason I'm telling you all this is kind of to segue into the latest disclosure that I want to bring forward. Some messages that have come through from Val Thor. He worked very close with Eisenhower, and apparently they still do. And also surviving spiritual abuse. I mean, there's physical abuse I think we've all been through, or some sort of toxic relationships, or dealing with sort of like maybe a narcissist or a control freak. And it doesn't matter if it's on the female side or male side, because it's not a gender-specific thing, like who's going to be that role, right? But the spiritual abuse. Have you ever like gotten a healing or worked with somebody who's so-called psychic that just really doesn't like honor the sacred space? They don't really know how to use the tools, and they can be a conduit of really, really dark energy? Well, during this decade of being a public speaker and during a breakup, I had one of the worst attacks that I've ever had. And it's taken me 4 to 5 years to recover. I still haven't really recovered. I still kind of like get triggered about it, but laughter, sometimes it's just, yeah. So, oh my God, like how much time am I putting on all this? But I'm gonna let's kind of like get into that and how we recover from that, because it's just like endless, this level of attack. But I don't like to be like, oh, I'm targeted and I'm attacked. I like to look at weapons and turn them into tools for growth and empowerment, and to be the override frequency of that challenge or adversity, so I can become senior to these lower energies that are trying to drop me in a very, very low vibration. So if it does put me in a place of, it's like, okay, sit with it, breathe, express yourself, let it out, give it unconditional love, maybe forgiveness, of course, and then the vibration will begin to come up again, like that Hawkins scale, which I usually have in my presentations. But no slides today, just me. I am talking too fast, even though I didn't get much sleep. So anyway, I'll never probably change as far as that goes. But anyway, when I turned down the attempted recruitment to this Mars colony that was based in Alternative 3, I started writing about Alternative 4, that we're all a part of, which is the power of the human spirit. No matter what kind of New World Order agenda they have planned, no matter who they're trying to take off planet to not help facilitate this, whoever, starseed kids with missions are being targeted in childhood, and like the whole human race, which has been targeted with indoctrination, things like Project Mockingbird and things that happened after the Second World War, particularly with Project Paperclip. The whole human race has been targeted. The planetary grid network has been impacted for thousands and thousands of years, and our galactic history is very vast as far as the roots of all of this. So I'm just thinking like Alternative 3, what about Alternative 4, And it's the power of the human spirit, unity consciousness, really connecting, with Mother Earth, understanding the galactic history behind how the planet became the planet, and the 0-point unified field, moving beyond the lower creator gods, the Anunnaki manipulations, and where the pantheons have been infiltrated by things that create sort of religions that put us in fear of a punishing God, or we're just sinners and we need to redeem ourselves. Really understanding the crimes against humanity and some of the underbelly of it all. Even though there's a lot of really well-intentioned people that have been a part of these groups and religions, so it's nothing about that. It's just, I think we all know that there's been a level of infiltration. So yeah, I've just been like, because I've been feeding baby goats for the last couple of weeks, I feel like a goat, like I'm the baby, like I'm turning into my North Node's in Capricorn, and it's cool, it's like, because it's flipping it around, because the symbology of some of these animals, like, connected to Satanism, and you think an owl is really satanic, or a goat, give me a break. They're, like, climbing the craziest mountains and scaling the most unbelievable stuff. It's like, how dare you leave the goats alone? So I'm really glad to be a goat mama. On Mother's Day, I feel very good that it's the first time I've been away from them for 4 weeks. I've been bottle feeding them, and now the boys and my husband have taken over. But anyway, so yeah, Alternative 4, So basically, alternatives 1, 2, and 3 are 3 agendas recommended by the Jason Society scholars. And like I said, I'm like, we don't have to evacuate the earth. The earth isn't out to like get us. If we work closely with the earth and we're in alignment with our truth frequency, if we're working to deprogram and activate our dormant DNA, we're co-creating with the earth. We are in a divine relationship and bond with our Mother Earth. If we're maybe living destructively and we're not like really paying attention, maybe we need to, leave and come back again and try again. I mean, there's multiple ways like we can die, so why do we worry about getting wiped out? We could go at any moment. And I redundantly say this, but like I'm reminded when I choke on like a tortilla chip, I'm like, oh, is this the way I'm gonna die? Okay. It's like, and people are spending their whole life, just with this fear of death, but at any moment, anything could happen. And then people flatline and come back after 20 minutes or so even. That's why I love those docuseries, because it's like a reminder, like, we are learning to die in the same body and transform and alchemize things and be reborn in the same physical vessel. And if we don't figure it out, guess what? We're infinite and immortal, and we come back and we try it again until we gain that self-mastery. And that self-mastery is a part of the different levels of Saturn, the lowest octave of Saturn having to do with tyranny and control, the highest octave being self-mastery and becoming a teacher, because you've overcome the trials and tribulations that are trying to enslave and trying to have abusive authority, trying to put us in fear with these facades and false flags. And again, not all of it is false. I don't want to undermine how anybody's experiencing it or saying, oh yeah, that's all bull. But we know that there's aspects of it that we have to be careful of. And it doesn't matter what that process is and how long it takes. Or to like assume they, are the enemy and we're victimized. This is an inner war that we're winning. We're learning to cut the cords with the old paradigm. We're learning to divorce ourselves from any kind of imposter and find our sovereignty, find our abundance, connect with Mother Earth, not be afraid of whatever transition we have to go to protect ourselves from having to be compromised. And if we are temporarily compromised, there's nothing we can't overcome and heal. So working closely with people like Kathy O'Brien, people that have been through secret space programs and MK Ultra stuff, who've been MyLabbed or born into Illuminati bloodlines with the satanic ritual abuse, man, the healing work that they've done, the things that have been put into them, is nothing compared to what the human race is dealing with. And if they can shine the light on truth and healing, there's nothing that humanity cannot overcome and heal from. No matter what we've ingested or breathed in, our capacity to turn lead into gold when we move into these higher frequencies is huge. A spiritualized body is going to recognize anything foreign and get rid of it, with the assistance of things like herbs and supplements, or just the way we think and perceive things especially. That's why I like to get into epigenetics, our thought forms, our belief systems, and some beliefs can lead us astray, and some beliefs can help us to gain knowledge and feel truth, because the truth frequency, the physical body, welcomes. And maybe we experience ascension symptoms and we can feel we're advancing instead of mistake those ascension symptoms for being something that is going to be an illness or something that's going to plague us for the rest of our lives, whether it's cancer, whether it's like constantly being exposed to the next variant, or just like, wow, okay, we're just going to have to deal with health issues for the rest of our lives. We have to remember that in the face of this, those challenges are going to help us to grow and reclaim our treasures and advance ourselves. And we all have to just hold hands and support one another. We're going to have our good days and bad days. We might just be like, oh, what was I thinking? I can't believe maybe I agreed to this. Or even if one didn't agree to it, there's still ramifications to every choice. But those ramifications are blessings in disguise for us to like begin to tap into our greater wisdom, to override it, and then create those corrections. We're creating corrections in our ancestral lineages, ancestral patterns. I mean, that's what we do on every level, being earth, air, fire, water, ether, being physical, emotional, spiritual, mental, So we are elemental beings. And yeah. So yeah, I talked about the aviary. So my mission is related to just freeing us out from the captivity that we were born into. And I learned about the deeper layers of the military-industrial complex, and it kind of hit me early on my mission, because it's sort of like, okay, Eisenhower was visiting me, and then you're kind of growing up, and you're like looking at the bookshelf. It's like, oh, that's my mom's granddad. This is my great-granddad. It's like all these books, filled with a family of authors writing. My uncle David Eisenhower wrote a bunch of books about just World War II. My granddad, his son, has written a ton of books, Bitter Woods, just autobiographies. I could name the list. And we were very close, like son and me. So as a child, I got a lot of recognition of like being kind of the black sheep by a lot of family members, especially my granddad. He was just like, I can see you're a warrior, and like, and he was so close to, Eisenhower. And just looking through family albums, it's like, wow, granddad and great-granddad are going to these camps, the concentration camps. There are actual photographs in our family albums. I'm just a kid, like, looking at this. So the downloads were coming in. I'm trying to connect the dots. And I'm just, like, sitting around dinner, like, I don't want to say a fly on the wall. Maybe a butterfly on the wall is a little better because flies are, just, like, observing, like, oh, my gosh, like, how did I end up in this family? But love has always been the focus. Then I'm like, well, what if there's, people are like, oh, you must be Illuminati. You're a presidential bloodline. And I've watched real close, done a lot of hypnoregression, and lots of disinformation connected to the Eisenhowers. We're a background of farmers. Anabaptist is sort of the religious sort of preference connected to the Mennonites, and just, very humble farmer kind of lifestyles. No trust funds, and when we all gather, it's just like, and there's nothing wrong with trust funds, don't get me wrong, but it's like, okay, this isn't like typical, right? And people are like, well, you're Eisenhower, aren't you taken care of? It's like, no, and that's good. I love to work hard, and I love to earn my way. But, again, people that might have it easier might have an agreement or a past life thing where they're being compensated for something before. That's not anything for any of us to judge. People have their own personal soul journeys. But there is a lot of misconception connected to the Eisenhowers, particularly your great-grandfather sold us out to the Greys. He signed a treaty, right? So for the last 10 years doing this research, I've been like, okay, yeah. Like, I remember being 8 years old standing in the grocery store line with my mom and seeing the Weekly World News article. That's a joke newspaper that said Eisenhower met with aliens. But this is the same newspaper that talks about, like, Bat Boy's going to take over New York City. So it's a total, like, joke newspaper like The Onion. And so I'm looking at the headline. I'm like, no. There's something to this, though. And later on, it's like going to events and just dealing with the Mars recruitment and them acknowledging, the Eisenhower connection. And a lot of UFO researchers and the people that I've run into always talk about, it's like, so I'm like, yeah, I'm going to talk about it. I'm not going to be biased. If he did, let's talk about it. Let's bring the truth out. Like, what really happened? The first contact with the Nordics, the second one with the Greys. They were warned about the Greys. Then later on, Val Thor. And, I mean, so much history there. So I have learned so much. I was willing to expose stuff, but I said, I'm not done yet. Something's telling me there's more. But I'm sharing what I know so far so that we can be a part of this larger conversation, not just to, like stay stuck in the past, but like, what is the implications of what that means in our future? What do those treaties mean in our future? Who are these people? What is this agenda? What is it connected to? So the ICC Nazi Draco alliance, the negative alien agendas, and the Greada Treaty are very linked. So I've learned so much, and especially in this last year or two, when I came across Elena Denon and went on a road trip with Alex Collier from an event in Shasta. I needed a ride home, and it's like, Alex, I'm like, Alex Collier's gonna give me a ride? Like an 8-hour road trip with Alex Collier? I've been quoting him like since the beginning, and it's just like, we just clicked, and I learned a lot from him too. And then Dan Cooper, the senior advisor to the Earth Alliance, came on the scene, and between the three of them, the real information really became clear after Lisa Renee made a lot of that information clear and the things that she's disclosed about that original treaty and relations with ETs taking place in the 1930s, and also with Roosevelt, Aleister Crowley, and Hitler. That's when the original treaty was in the works to begin to do abductions. And then after the Second World War, Project Paperclip, and all these different sort of things, there was something that happened that they don't want us to know about. And this is the first time, like, probably anybody is hearing it, because it was the first time I was really hearing it. We hear about the UFOs flying over the Capitol, White House kind of deal, 1952, I think it was July 19th. We hear about that flyover, and we hear a lot of different researchers trying to pull the pieces together, and some have done amazing, Dan Willis and Michael Sala. And I've done a lot of interviews and done a lot of, especially trips and adventures with Michael Sala. We're just like trying to put the pieces together. And sometimes we get real close, and they've gotten real close. But the final kind of like missing links have come in the last year and a half. And I have about 80 screenshots and like hundreds of emails, and I'm inserting it into my book, which will be published by the end of the year, beginning of next year. So next time I go to an event, I'll have the book that explains it all and connects all these dots. And my husband's editing it right now, bless his heart, and he's just like, holy shit. And I'm like, really? Are you sure? It's like, I'm like, cool, because it's like been in the works for a long time. But I don't think it would have made sense to publish it until I had this breakthrough year to really confirm some of this information about what really took place and what we're kind of up against and what this kind of means. And it might exonerate, yes. I'm not all about like, let's spend our whole workshop exonerating Eisenhower and all this misinformation. But it has a ripple effect. If we're not living with truth and clarity and we're living in misinformation or a false history, that keeps a part of ourselves unconscious or something dormant because we don't really know. It's like we would want to know about our past and our childhood and the things we need to heal if we have physical symptoms or like trauma that we can't really explain. We need to kind of like dig into it. Doesn't mean we have to like relive it, but sometimes it just takes that inner work. So I feel like we're doing the inner work as a collective to save our history from being rewritten and preserve the actual truth so that we can be more clear and more connected and more aware of all the different tactics being used to make these times incredibly confusing. And of course, that administration was huge as far as what happened between the Second World War and into his 2-term presidency and all the sort of like projections and misinformation and blame put on him. Even people, I get tons of messages, and I always have, your great-grandfather starved like 8 million, like all these Germans, and he's worse than Hitler, and the Rhine death camps. He's like, can you answer to that? And I'm just like, well, first off, I'm not, maybe I'm a walk-in. Did you think of that? Like, maybe I'm just trying to expose all this stuff? It's like settle down, okay? So then, it's just like, if we're going to right the wrongs of our ancestors, maybe just like appreciate the fact that I'm willing to like take on this freaking task. All right, it's like, calm down, okay? But besides all that, that book by Bach called Other Losses, I researched very deeply because I suspected that there's something not right about this. And if there is something right about it, I'll expose it. Because I'm here for truth, not to be biased, not to hide anything, not to allow, any kind of cover-ups. It's not what I'm here for. So I really worked a lot of energy. I came up with the presentation. It's probably going to be in my second book. And I almost don't need to because Mark Feldman, I think is his name, is a very, very acclaimed researcher and documentary writer and historian that exonerated that whole story with the facts and documents and everything that said that's absolute crap. Eisenhower did not starve the Germans. First of all, we're a German family. And in the West Point yearbook, it says Swedish Jew. And there's nothing wrong with being a Swedish Jew, but it's just not the truth, right? So I'm all about truth. So let's get our freaking facts straight. And I feel the reason he was visiting me since childhood and the connection with Val Thor is very much like, we're not going to, stop working with you until you get to the bottom of this because this has to be sorted out. So it's been endless. You can't really ever take a vacation because it'll either show up in your dreams or you wake up with a download or whatever you want to call it. And now I just feel like, wow, I'm really ready to just really get this out there. And tie it into what this window's about, what it means for us, what it means for like everything. And way before that administration, our galactic history that we don't learn about in school. The Lyran Wars, the Orion Wars, Tara and Tiamat exploding, dropping into this lower harmonic universe, and Maldek exploding, the asteroid belts that formed because of it. That's why my study of astrology has been so helpful, because it's helped me to understand our galactic history, because I kind of dig into deeper layers, understanding the north and south nodes, the precession of the equinoxes, and the Saturn-Moon matrix, and the dark technologies that manipulate planetary consciousness and the planetary grid network in order to bind us into feeding an artificial timeline that we're actually enabling without realizing it. They require our life force to even be able to generate an artificial timeline, and that's why we see a lot of harvesting and siphoning take place, and in the child ritual stuff, babies, all that, the adrenochrome, I could go into all that kind of darkness, and I think you guys are well aware of it. But that Baphomet energy, that reversal energy, the dark mother reversals, how that mother energy wasn't really able to be grounded and anchored into the planet after the electrical wars, the Lemurian Holocaust, the Atlantean cataclysms, and the Sumerian Egyptian invasion that really, disconnected us from our galactic memories and higher dimensions. We're just learning in science that we have junk DNA. Yeah, it's just junk. And I'm like, oh yeah, really? It's like, it's kind of like, it's good that you skip class because we really don't want you to raise your hand. So, go ahead and have a bad attendance, okay? We'll try and get you out of here and just graduate. You just shut up. But I was always challenging this stuff. I'm like, nope, something's not right there. And so I was just on a quest to okay, what is this junk? Well, tells us a greater love story. All about sacred gene integration of polarity, activating the alchemical marriage, the hierogamic union, and moving into that Christ consciousness, and activating this Christ Sophia divine template, and restoring the tree of life DNA architecture. Out of this sort of tree of knowledge duality, where it's been targeted with mind control and social engineering, so that we can gain self-knowledge to begin to rebuild everything that's fallen unconscious and all the scrambled fire codes that have linked us into things like the Saturn Moon Matrix, where an artificial reality is being thrust upon us, as we breathe in, and all this stuff in our bodies, to create an antenna link with the things that steal our energy and create a timeline that is not taking humanity on a good trajectory. So that's where we just say, I'm divorcing you. You're an imposter. It's narcissistic. It's controlling. It's tyrannical. I don't want you as a partner. I don't want to co-create with that. I want true love. I want to connect with Mother Earth. I want to find that treasure within, so that I'm co-creating with this greater potential that the Earth and cosmos and all the alignments that happen, and the greater intelligence, the true logos, and planetary intelligence is guiding us towards, that we are embodied kind of replicas of. But as long as we're under the programming, we're feeding that reversal matrix, and we don't realize that we're enabling something that we don't have to agree to or consent to. And the minute we take our power back, they lose the ability to feed. They get a little scared, so they're going to psychically attack and try and make us feel defeated, and pick on our triggers and create different psyops and things to just really keep us in a low vibration. But I do the FU therapy, and it works more than anything else. Yeah, and I'm like, God, out of all the different things that I've done, that seems to be works the most. But yeah, not really, but sort of. So mass biological and mind control devices exist well beyond the technology of implanting tiny physical chips into humans. It's really how they impacted the planetary grid network thousands of years ago is relatively, things like Harp and Gwen towers and being chipped is relatively superficial compared with ancient existing global grid systems, which can be used for manipulating the evolution of all life on the planet, including the planet's evolution itself. And that's from Noel Huntley, if you guys have ever heard of him, PhD, and he writes about global grid systems and mass mind control. So this is something that the manipulation of our planetary grids, the overlays of the archonic dark technologies that siphon, have overlaid on top of the true circuitry of Gaia. They've impacted the stargates, the circuitry. They've unplugged certain places where the electric and magnetic energies were flowing together, the Albion and Cathar bodies, the divine union that the Earth flows with, so that when we're born, we're like, oh yeah, we feel it through osmosis, and we advance pretty quick. But no, we're born into these reversals, and we're stuck in front of the television, and we're given weird food and weird holidays where it's like, oh yeah, it's really a smart thing to have your kid, dress like whatever, and just go door to door and just eat a bunch of candy. The dentist is like, yeah, this is why I'm rich. And it's like every holiday, it's like, this is so inverted, And I'm not I'm into everything and into nothing. But what we know about some of these dates and significance of what it really means, these are very initiatory, very important times that we really connect with that time of year, to heading into winter, really facing the crone, coming back in spring, like Persephone coming out of the underworld. That nature really reveals this the mythology that exists in our soul. And we are writing the script from here on as far as how we go through these myths and initiations, so that we keep regenerating, coming back in the spring stronger and more abundant and more colorful than the last cycle. But it's just all this hijacking is taking us in a completely different direction, making us very unhealthy, very anxiety-ridden, very depressed without really being able to put our finger on, what in the hell, why? And they're like, oh yeah, you should go on this drug, something's wrong with you. It's like, what, you're not in agreement to this? Isn't this awesome? It's like, yeah, it's really freaking awesome. It's no, I think anger and depression is a healthy response to the BS of life, but we have to give it unconditional love and not stay stuck in it. We need to ask it, what do you have to say? What does my anxiety want? It has a message. Same with pain, same with sadness. It needs a voice. It's like a child that's just please, I need to share this. We don't silence it. Sometimes it's just if you're having a temper tantrum over a toy, or parents know what I mean when your kids are, it's in the grocery store line is just filled with everything to make your kid just scream, I want that candy. It's oh God, if we could just redo it all. And we are. because we all have the resources and strength and missions and callings to work together and do this together, pull our resources together, starve that beast and system, and do it from the ground up on a very like grassroots level in our communities, locally. And if it means that we have to have guards protect the land so that Schwabi doesn't come along and say you'll have nothing and be happy, yeah, well guess what? You're not going to want to come close. I have all these signs that say, oh, you think the dogs are something to beware of. You better watch out for the owners. I like all these funny things. And yeah, Anatolian shepherds. Like, it's like, oops, didn't mean to open the door, because it's like they are major guard dogs. They're like some of the most powerful guard dogs that ever existed. But I'm not looking to harm anybody at all, of course. It's not like we play that game or go into that zone, but, we're figuring out a way to like at least scare the piss out of them. We're like, we're going to go to the next house. And then call the neighbors and be like, they're coming. No. All right. I knew not getting any sleep would probably not be but I'm just excited, and I'm so excited to be here. So anyway, artificial intelligence systems have been designed and weaponized, specialized for emotional and ultimately spiritual harassment. This is so that the emotional and spiritual energies get lowered to the level that a machine can entrain, follow, mimic, match, record, modify, and replicate that energetic blueprint. So when we feel like we're spinning in a patterning and we can't get out of it, there is sort of something going on as long as we're consenting or agreeing to a particular program or unresolved trauma or trigger. We just kind of get locked in, or we're in the blame, shame, victim game, or we're just the ultimate victim, or we just keep manifesting the same thing, the same kind of relationships, so we're not really growing and learning. So this is a huge step to free ourselves from AI, which is to just be like, okay, what do I need to change? What do I need to do differently? And that focus on inner work and energy maintenance, and just we clean dishes in order to be able to cook a next meal. We know if we leave food out and dishes out, we're not going to be able to successfully cook the next meal without, dealing with flies and germs and fungus and mold. So we have to, I know I say this redundantly in most of my talks, we have to do that with our mind, our spiritual energies, and our emotions. We have to be gardeners of our soul so that we can pull out the weeds, we can pull out the stuff that doesn't serve us, any belief system that's stuck in there throughout the day, or a projection, or wherever the wounds are. You're not going to eat with a broken mug. Either glue it or get another mug. And just a stupid story, when I was really overwhelmed as a mother of twins, pretty much by myself, I had so many dishes to do, and I was working full-time as a landscaper, all sorts of jobs. And it was like, I'm just going to throw all the dishes away and go to a thrift store and buy a bunch of new ones, because it's just like, because why not? It's like, let's just get rid of it all. Instead, it's like, so it's sort of like doing inner work. Do we really want to relive everything? Do we really, if it's almost like getting too piled up, can we just like, and this is about the fire of transformation. We can throw it into the fire. We can just say, enough already, and reset the energy. And maybe look back and be like, how can I avoid having them all pile up again? And, maybe work things a little differently. And that's the only time I did it. So I was conscious of like, okay, that's probably not a good thing. But thank God for thrift stores, right? But anyway, so, people talk about bifurcation and this and that, and I feel like there's a bridge between whatever is bifurcating. We're in service to humanity. A lot of us are going to stay for as long as necessary to help those find themselves, their truth, their sovereignty, their healing power. And some are maybe going to move on, and I mean, who knows what it's going to look like for anybody. But instead of like a split where it's like, where do they go? We just split over here. I feel like there's going to be a lot of bridging and a lot of connections so that we can provide tools and modalities and things to help heal from these things that have been assaults and weapons on the mind, on the body, on everything. And I feel once we awaken, once we get our sovereignty back and the ability to free think, we neutralize the technologies, the dark technologies, and all the stuff that's in our bodies that is toxic, or the heavy metal. I mean, our body's more able to move it out. Because if the weapons were enough, they wouldn't bother with the social engineering. They wouldn't bother with the fake news. They'd be like, oh, we got all these weapons, so we don't need the real weapon, which is messing with our heads since childhood, giving us false history, false information, fake news, indoctrination in the school system. We're seeing it like really ramp up. But we're on the verge of a huge breakthrough. And all the astrological alignments are supporting this. The Pluto returns. Last time that happened was 1776. The conjunctions of Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter in 2019, which really started off this whole corona stuff. And but what it really represented was a huge initiation and growth period for humanity. To have that life review, to go into that dark night of the soul on a collective level, face our fears of death. And initiate into the transformation and alchemical part of it so we can emerge as the rising phoenix and leave that old paradigm behind. And utilize everything that we learned and gained from it, not throwing out the baby with the bathwater, but expanding it into the next level of the things that we might have been kept from or forgotten about. And this is what the Great Initiation has to do with. But again, there's a weaponized version of it so that all the symbology that we're seeing is cutting off our connection to the breath of life, to the mother energy that is grounded back in the physical planet. And the proof of that is endless. Like the 13th sign, the sun moving through the 13th sign of Fiacus in 2010 really marked a timeline shift. The mother energy being able to be anchored back into the planet as the diamond heart that is really finishing off the kind of grid work that a lot of grid workers and starseed missions have been able to accomplish, that we're able to connect with that mother energy, that unconditional love, the mother, father, Christ, Sophia child, whatever you feel comfortable in calling it. It's that cosmic trinity connected to the 0-point unified field and that ether energy, which is ruling a Fiacus, right? You have earth, air, fire, water. It's like, what's your astro sign? Libra. Okay, that's an air sign. Aries, oh, that's a fire sign. It's like, does anybody say, oh yeah, so-and-so, that's an ether element? No, we've not been having a lot of access to that ether energy because the dark technologies, the dodecahedron particularly, was put in reversal code so that the symbology of the inverted pentagram with the ether going into the ground was not accessible to humans. So physical matter has had more dominion over us than spirit, than our higher knowledge and awareness and wisdom and our powerful hearts and ability to like really work together and come together. Now that we're waking up to it, that ether energy is going to come in. It's going to purify our inner elements, earth, air, fire, water, and it's going to restore the divine template, the tree of life template. And it does it pretty effortlessly as long as we don't get distracted, we don't give our power away to the BS, and we stand in alignment. And there's nothing it can't repair and overcome. And again, people are getting sick. You know, it's not that it's all a hoax, but it's like, what is the source of it? What is the intention behind it? And there's a lot of well-intentioned people that have nothing to do with that dark agenda that are doing their best they can in these fields as teachers, as doctors, as nurses, as people in our society. So we got to figure out a way to work together to transition out of what doesn't serve us and utilize these greater skills and abilities to help one another transition so we're not afraid of that next paycheck or what's going to happen to our kids if we can't put food on the table, and reverse and transform and correct where there's already been damage done. I mean, who knows, like so many people that maybe they lost their ability to walk and the doctor said you'll never be able to walk again, and they walked again. Or, oh yeah, I've got 4 more years to live. I mean, look at Sean David Morton. They're like, he should have been dead like 6 months ago. I mean, when somebody tells us something, that's a form of mind control. How about like, no, I don't think so. I'm in charge of me, and I'm going to defy the odds. And when we prove that to ourselves, we get a lot more inspired to be able to take on any challenge and not just agree to or submit to or consent to somebody else's prediction, somebody else's diagnosis. And of course it serves us to a certain degree, but where is it taking it too far to the point that we forget that these adversities should bond us closer to ourselves instead of take us further away, where now it's in somebody else's hands. And they have to reassure us and say, oh yeah, you're either cured or nah, you only got this long. It's like who are you to say that? But there's so many amazing doctors and people in our society, and I honor them so much. There's so many people that have had their lives saved in hospitals, but there is, as we know, infiltration and pockets that are, it's kind of like a landmine. It's like you don't know if you're going to step on it or you're going to have to be face-to-face with it. But it's also initiation to be able to overcome it. A lot of people talk about underground bases right under our noses, underneath schools, cemeteries, hospitals, and children that are whistleblowers that are saying, this happened in my school. A cop was there, my teacher was there. The cover-up of the Hampton kids. This was just like right under their noses. This wasn't just like being taken off. I mean, it's horrendous to wrap one's head around. But we have to be brave to listen to the victims. If they're brave enough to tell their stories, we have to be brave enough to listen. It's not conspiracy theory when somebody has the guts to say, this happened to me, especially a child, and they have ways to cover it up, to undermine it. Oh, that's just in their imagination. They have created departments of the health industry, medical and mental health industry, that very much squashes these testimonies. So the more awareness we put on it, the less they're able to get away with it, because of course we know secrecy is everything. And then we can begin to remove them, have this huge planetary exorcism, and rebuild the schools and all the well-intentioned people in the medical industry as well, and do it right, and do it like with each other's love and support, compassion, forgiveness, and understanding of how screwed up this has all been, and cut ourselves some slack instead of let ourselves fall into the divide and conquer, and or too much fear or polarization that they like want us to be in with like the whole right and left thing and the whole everything. You know, you're either for this or against this. It's good to walk in the middle and just have neutrality. There's not really a right or wrong choice here. You know, we have to empower each other to feel comfortable with the choices we've made and know how to correct where it's maybe caused us damage. And whether it's coming from an outer agenda or just us falling on our faces and getting back up again as humans, you know, we have to brush ourselves off. That's the whole idea of the 0 card in the tarot, which is the Fool. The Fool is just like, I fell down, get back up again. It's just like, hee, you know, and just knows how to laugh and not take it all too seriously. And so when we think about the 0-point unified field and the energy of 0, it's not just connecting us with the Mother Arc energy and the Stargate that is in the location of Uluru, going right into the core sun, which is a diamond heart. It takes us into a vibration of like, wow, we can just be reclaiming our divine innocence, our ability to be playful, allow that magical child to breathe and come out, and face all those wounds and neutralize them with maybe laughter, humor, and mutual love and support, so that we're not just carrying the burden of all this trauma that we might feel we can't talk about. And I feel like we're a mature enough group, and a lot of people are ready for these tougher conversations. Instead of the facade of, oh yeah, I've all figured out, and my truth is the only way, it's like, no, I have no problem admitting how much I struggle. And in my book, you know, I tell stories where it's just like, yeah. And a lot of people have been able to. Like, what do I have to hide? You know, we're all on this journey, and we all have different kinds of missions, and there's no better route. We're all heading to the same place, back to source, back to who we truly are, our sovereignty, our authenticity, our divine blueprint, so we can upgrade, remove the frequency fences, get out of the personality matrix, and move into the soul matrix, which to me is 5D, and that's having an empowered throat chakra that speaks truth and chooses words that are healing and inspiring instead of things that just like bring you down or hurt your feelings or, you know, just continue to spread these mind viruses. So to cross from the threshold of like kind of 5G AI into 5D, we need to be very aware of our words. We're magicians. We are manifesting reality through our words and what we choose to believe. And that belief can turn into a knowingness when it begins to prove itself. And uncovering these greater facts and hidden truths and recovering our lost history, you know, is a good way too. And whatever we go through, as long as we can develop a truth frequency and be authentic and true to ourselves, no matter what we're going through, we're going to see through the lies and the deceptions because it's not going to feel like a match. We're going to be able to smell it from afar. Or remember, oh yeah, no, I was in that kind of relationship. I can, you know, kind of like sense that energy signature of like an abuser or narcissist, no matter how charming they are. You know, it's just kind of like, this is part of the life lessons. I know it's like breathe and drink some water. I know. So our emotional body is linked magnetically to the earth. So humanity is now learning how to dispel all beliefs and behaviors that don't fit into the new paradigm. 0 point is the breaking point beyond which the insanity of the old timelines will no longer be able to survive. That's how we collapse artificial timelines, because we're no longer feeding it, we're not in a relationship to it, we're not in a dependency bond, we don't have energetic cords with it. We might have to still function, you know, and deal with it, you know. We're not out of the woods yet. We have to deal with the money system. We can't just go off the grid all of a sudden, but we're working towards this kind of stuff. So once, you know, you cut the cords, then the breakup and the divorce is already underway. It's going to try and make you miserable, though. It's like, oh, no, we're not going to let you leave that easy, you know, and that's why we see a lot of drama with lawsuits. We see a lot of drama with, like, you know, weird bills coming to the house. And I have to joke, like, when I deal with the tax people, I'm just like, well, you guys told me I was dyslexic and had ADD, so how the hell am I going to figure out my taxes? And like, you know, I was dropped on the head when I was a kid. Like, nobody taught me this stuff. Like, you know, so, like, cut me some slack. And it's like, they haven't called back. I'm like, But I'm sure they will come back with a vengeance. Who knows? But I'm figuring it out. There are a lot of people that are figuring out how we can move beyond all that and just have our sovereignty. But it's just funny. It's like, you know, these are the stigmas you gave me growing up when I knew it was BS. So it's like, wow, okay, well, this is what you created. I don't know how to read that. I don't understand what that means. So anyway, that's kind of stupid, but. So I could go into the black cube matrix and all the dark technology, but who needs to just do that? I mean, there's plenty of dark technologies. It's all about siphoning and harvesting, keeping the planetary energies in its lowest octave. When we are the ones that have to initiate beyond that and break our connection with where it's streaming into us through media, entertainment industries, and where any kind of indoctrination is, or things that encourage a dependency and a lack of sovereignty and a lack of finding self-knowledge. And again, there's very well-intentioned people, that teacher that might have changed your life, or that doctor that you could really trust. So again, it's not all like, that's all bad and this is all good. It's a very mixed bag. But our experience shows us where we need to grow on a soul level if we confront it, instead of continually reliving the pattern or finding ourselves unable to get to the other side. Anybody want to give me like a time check so I know how much time I have left? 5:03. So I have like 35 minutes. Okay. So as we clear false and inorganic architecture from suppressing and impairing our consciousness, we are extracting the alien enslavement programming. And we're de-weaponizing all of it. And so in every moment, we have a choice. Are we going to connect with organic ascension signals, which is really us being like strong in who we are and being able to face challenges and deal with conflict from our higher self, integrate that higher self into the lower, so it's not just, it's over there, and then I'll go back into my lower self. It's like that integration of polarity. Or are we going to face these moments and choose the lowest kind of vibration in order to cope? And we know that doesn't get us anywhere. It creates drama, conflict, heartache, misunderstanding, and confusion. So it's very important that we find friends and partners that are willing to do that extra work, willing to kind of sit down and not roll their eyes like, oh God, women, they archive everything, or like men, oh my God, they just don't get it. It's like we got to drop that dialogue of where we have taken on these distortions and these subpersonalities and these inauthentic roles that are really encouraged, so that we're not heartbroken and miserable humans, so that we can experience true loves and appreciate the sacredness of sexuality and divine union and how that relates to, but not everybody's going to see it the same way. So it's not like there's one way it should look. And if anybody says so, that's not really fair. That's not sovereign. So however it works for a person, we're all on our own journeys to discover it and what works for us. Even if it takes lifetimes to maybe have that epiphany, like, okay, maybe I did this for lifetimes and I'm ready for this now. I mean, that's for one's own soul growth, and I'm just not into the kind of judgment, this way or the highways. Just doesn't work. As long as we can have mutual love and respect and make sure that there's consent and nobody's getting harmed or abused or manipulated, I think we're all going to do just fine. Okay, so Dan Cooper, who I put out a video with, I think, Dan Willis and Elena Danan, and he started commenting in the comments. And I'm like, who is this guy? Because he's got a lot of information. And I said, oh, hi, my name's Laura, and you're talking about, Eisenhower a lot. I'm his great-granddaughter, and I do all these. Oh, I know who you are. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, do you want my email? Because it'd be really great to have a conversation. It's almost like he had been waiting. He didn't want to push himself on me, and just kind of appeared. He's not looking for any money. He's very low-key and just kind of behind the scenes. But of course, you have to always be skeptical. I never really want to have fixed belief when it comes to trying to rewrite history. I'm very just as discerning as possible, but when it really connects dots, when it makes sense, when I feel that energy in my body kind of ground me, where it's just like, oh, that makes sense, and it lines up with this event or that event, I'm going to go with it. And his kindness and patience and just willingness to answer all these questions has really blown my mind, and he's willing to be named, and his bio put in my book, and his, and the quotes that go along with it. I could read all of it. It's pretty long, but he professes to be an expert researcher, a talent that he honed through 20 years of performing legal research. He claims that his knowledge of the historical events described herein came originally from both of his two Nazi SS commanding officers who, commanding him during his 20-and-back stint with the Nazis' Dark Fleet, they basically disclosed everything. They expected him to kind of stay with them and stay enslaved. But events took place that apparently Eisenhower put in the works to pull these people out of these dark projects and secret space programs to push them in a different trajectory so that they'd be de-weaponized and using these enhancements to better humanity, and he's one of them. There's so much to describe about it. It's kind of better just to read it in the book. But this is where he found out that the two Nazi SS officers related and often bragged about to him that their personal participation in the Battle of D.C., July 1952, where the Nazis defeated the United States, they were, where negotiations happen. When this flyover happened, it was like, oh my gosh, we don't have this kind of weaponry, and this is connected to the Nazis and the Draco Alliance, and all that kind of stuff. what happened in 1952 is that there was an unconditional surrender agreement to the Nazis. And because they don't want us to know this, they were like, let's create a story that Eisenhower sold us out to the Greys. And I was talking to him about it. I'm like, well, what about what Dan Cooper said or Phil Schneider? He's like, yes, those were really powerful whistleblowers, but they're not going to give them that information. They're not just going to be like somebody who's potentially going to be a whistleblower. You're going to give like the major top secret piece to them. So a lot of well-intentioned researchers and whistleblowers in this community have been kind of going along with that narrative. And even I was like, okay, is that really the case? Okay, well, let's open that up. And Elena Danaan, in her book, her first book, and in the second book I wrote the foreword to about We'll Never Let You Down about Val Thor, she reached out to me in comments on YouTube, and she's like, oh, I got this information you really should know. And I don't always read the comments, because as we know, like, it's like, do we really want to run into troll today? It's like, I'm kind of having a weird day, but I always want to hear like feedback, and I want to communicate with people. But anyway, her post stood out, and I contacted her. We did an interview, and she explained like MJ-12 did it behind his back, and made that very clear. And then she wrote the second book, which I wrote the foreword to, and she's like, oh yeah, after we got in contact, I had another visitation with Val Thor, which Thor Hand connected her with, and he has a message for you, which I'll share. I'm always skeptical about any kind of channeling or implants and this and that, but but anybody who knows her and just her beautiful heart and spirit and soul is just like, I just have an incredibly open mind, and the things that really stick, really stick. And it lines up with things that Alex Collier told me, and especially Dan Cooper. And yeah, so basically, further information about this is, okay, I told him to email me, and then all of a sudden it's like, do you mind if I ask you some questions? He's like, yeah, shoot. And I'm like, are you sure? I'm like, can I compensate for your time, And all of a sudden he's like, nope, not allowed. I'm like, okay. He hasn't really put himself out there. He doesn't really do interviews, but I couldn't believe the information he was sharing. So again, I have some of the most important quotes that are going to be in my book, but here's one of them. Ike had no choice but to openly comply with the official instrument of surrender, the unconditional surrender of the United States to Nazis, signed by all of Congress and most of the prominent businessmen of the period on July 19th, 1952. When Truman was president, Eisenhower opposed the instrument of surrender of 52 secretly, by establishing various military and civilian covert units for that purpose. One of them was Ike's Force, also known as the United States Marine Corps Special Section, or USMC-SS for short. Randy Kramer has talked about it. This is where Project Moonshadow and a lot of the Monarch kind of programming and secret super soldier programs, where there were some that were able to like move in this direction that he set up. But he couldn't like really monitor it. He's like put in the position of being a president, so he had to kind of count on the people that, he brought into it. He realized MJ-12 was lying to him, they were betraying him, they were not giving him access, and he wanted to invade Area 51 because of it. He realized he didn't really have the allies he thought he had, and it was all just top secret. In 1947, they put the laws in place that this is above the president, so that it was impossible for him to sign the treaties, he keeps saying. And then even he says, how many times do I have to tell you? I'm like, no, it's not like I don't believe you, but I'm like, sorry, I don't mean to keep asking, but like, I'm just wanting to make sure. And he goes into greater and greater detail. So, he says it still survives today. In fact, that U.S. military unit is the most successful military unit opposing the interplanetary corporate conglomerate Nazi draconian empire alliance. Today, by far, he ordered the first attack on the Greys at the deep underground military base at Dulce, New Mexico, knowing that he would lose that battle just to learn more about his enemy and to test his best against them. And this is different than the Dulce Wars that Phil Schneider talks about, which happened later. We don't hear about this stuff. We don't hear about this stuff in the disclosure community. So he had to wait before he came out, before he was able to even contact me. And it has a lot to do with the sphere beings. Corey Good has talked about it. I don't know where that information has gone. I'm not going to say anything about my opinion about it or why, because I don't do that about anybody publicly, but he helped me to understand what really took place with the sphere beings. So anyway, they invaded that, also, Area 51 later on, and lost 30-1 back then. This battle, like I said, is different than the one that occurred in 1969. Several thousand U.S. Special Forces troops engaged against the Gray forces then, and nearly half of them lost their lives in that action. Ike also established the White Hats, the first of which were Texan U.S. generals and admirals. That's where the name White Hats came from. Ike's White Hats are the ones that brought Ronald Reagan into the fold right after the ICC Nazi-Draco alliance had him shot for attempting to disclose the secret space program fully. It was Reagan and the White Hats that had me convince China to do business and to teach China how to do business to make them a powerful ally in the fight against the ICC Nazi-Draco. I mean, this is obviously under layers of the China that we see. And this is the Earth Alliance and the things that they've connected with. And of course, I just don't hear something like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm sure that's the absolute truth. So I asked him the tough questions. He always fires back. He's always there immediately, pretty immediately. Anyway, with another special unit, a civilian one, established by Ike, he also ensured that numerous photos and videos of Nazi spacecraft and other SSP technology would continue to resurface in the mass and alternative medias. And there's more here. I don't want to read the whole thing. But, and that was what I grew up with also, with taking pictures of the concentration camps. So when people say, oh, no, that never happened. Yes, it did happen, but a lot more happened. There was a lot more genocide and Holocaust throughout our history that we don't hear about because of a particular agenda that we know about that has to do with the Zionist stuff, and that's too much to get into. The whole deal is we're unwinding from it, we're getting our power back, and we're not allowing this history to be rewritten. It doesn't mean that we have to have it like 100%. It doesn't mean that we have to put all our attention on it, but we at least need to know there's a lot of missing pieces. And so, anytime somebody comes at me again and says, your great-grandfather sold us out to the Greys, it's like, here, read my book. It's not just Dan Cooper, it's Elena, it's Alice Collier. And anyway, according to Dan Cooper, the U.S. surrendered to the Nazis unconditionally, like I said, July 19th, 1952. This was under the Truman administration. Hence, Dwight could not have possibly signed any agreements with any alien species. He did not have the legal power to do so. He wasn't even allowed to attend the negotiations. What to speak of being made privy to the terms of those agreements. That is how I know what Elena told you about MJ-12 going behind Ike's back is true. So this is just one of a couple of many. Even Lisa Renee talks about it. Since the Majestic 12 and Zeta Gray alien trade agreements were made about 85 years ago, Earth inhabitants have been aggressively experimented upon with hidden technologies used to implant thoughts as one of the many prongs of social engineering programs. And that's from Lisa. So anyway, so I'm just like, wow, it just lifts a lot off of the family energies of just having to contend with that. My mom gets those emails too. She ignores them. I'm like the person, I'll handle it in this family. We don't really talk about it, but it's like, okay, I'll take it on. I'll go to these events. I'll do all my research. I'll do everything I can. But we won't bring it up when we all come together to gather because it's just going to be too much, especially with all the cousins and the kids. So Uncle David Eisenhower just brings over the karaoke machine, and we just have like a blast. And I'm just like, this is so surreal that I'm singing Led Zeppelin in front of the Eisenhower family, I'm doing duets like the Carpenters with my Uncle David, and we're just laughing and having fun. And it's just like all that stuff. It's like we just respect each other's callings and missions, and as we trust that we're doing our part. But if we bring that energy too much to the dining room tables and the times that we're able to gather, we're not going to really just be able to experience the love and the bonds that we have as a family. And I really love being raised by this family. Ike's son, my granddad, was starting to teach me how to fly a plane. He really appreciated what he was sensing about me. And he just would tell me crazy stories and things that you wouldn't even imagine. He was the ambassador to Belgium. I mean, I just have so many stories that my aunt has shared. And I just almost want to share real quick. They're in the, the embassy. And this hippie bus drove up. And my granddad asked my Aunt Mary, who was staying with him, what is that? What are those? Oh, those are hippies. They're like anti-war and this and that. I said, oh, wow, cool. And so he was in a bathrobe, tube socks, and sunglasses. And he was all excited to go out there and shake their hand and say hi to them. And this, you can even ask my aunt. I know it's just like, we're not going to call her right now. But I was like, are you freaking serious? And he was starting to tell me this stuff because he whispered to me a few things. And anyway, my aunt's like, he got in the VW with them and drove off, and came back and he was like, wow. He's like, if I grew up in your generation, I would have been one of them. Even though he's written stories about war and he fought in war himself, he was a brigadier, he was a general, in his own right, brigadier. He said, I have to write these stories about war, but we're not into war at all. And we know that there's been some infiltration in some of these movements and this and that, but and that's why he whispered to me one time, he's like, yeah, deep down, he's like, and we acknowledge, he's one of the first original whistleblowers, and he's just like, I'm really a hippie at heart. The kind of, that's more revolutionary, that really just is protesting, no war, love and peace, that kind of thing. And he really kind of admired that, I had that kind of free spirit lifestyle a little bit. maintaining sovereignty as well. But it was just really crazy to hear those kind of stories. I'm like, seriously? He just like gets into a VW bus, drives off. I'm like, did she smoke a joint with them? It's like, and my aunt was like, whoa, really? And this was at my granddad, John S.D. Eisenhower's funeral. We were all going around telling stories. And then when I shared my story about my connection with Eisenhower as a child and how he's helped me with this mission, even though I didn't get into detail, they all clapped. Some were in tears. They were like, wow, like really kind of honoring the role I played without kind of wanting to know too much. But anyway, so Elena says, and I don't want to like read this quote because it's like, oh, look what Val Thor, said. But like when you really have those days of, I wouldn't say I go into self-doubt, but you just really feel like, oh, is the mission failing? Like what's happening? When we just run into those walls and we know that it's not really the truth, but we have to move through that difficult emotion. It was really helpful that, and she wrote this in the book, that, because I'm like, why don't they take me up on the ships? Why isn't Val Thor talking to me? And why, like, I'm not having dreams about Eisenhower anymore. It's like, am I been cut off? Like, am I doing something wrong? Like, why can't I like have like a more visceral kind of communication? And I came to understand that when that communication came close, I would get super homesick or like, oh, yeah, I don't want to come back. But at the same time, of course, I want to come back. I'm all about Mother Earth. I'm all about us. But I hadn't met all of you yet. And, that we're all so alike and we've been on this journey and on this path. So, but yeah, I was just kind of hitting a wall with even after the fact of all that, just because I think we've all been on kind of a roller coaster with what we've been witnessing. And so anyway, she said to me, or I read in the book, she said this to Commander Val. After I met you for the first time, I had the privilege to connect with President Dwight's great-granddaughter, Laura. We spoke about you and about what happened with the treaties. She knew the truth deep within herself, and she was glad you could confirm it, that MJ-12 signed behind his back. Val Thor replies, this is like so trippy, and then, it's not like I'm like, oh, that must have happened. I'm like, no, are you serious? Did that really happen? Maybe, maybe not, but why would they tell me this? Why, it's like, what? So anyway, Val Thor replies, Laura, yes, I know who you're talking about. I met her once, but she didn't know it was me. I vowed to look after Dwight's descendants, and Laura's very special, and I don't like that word because we're all special, but whatever. She came to restore the truth. She needed to learn about the faces and the plans of the enemy, but I was always protecting her all along, and so did Dwight, until this day. Laura holds a guiding light, which will be followed by many. Give her my salutations. So, of course, I'm just like, oh, my God, are you serious? Oh. And that really meant a lot to me, but it's like, that little kind of like monkey mind is just like, there's got to be a catch here. But at the same time, it's like, no. I mean, it doesn't surprise me, my connection with Venus as well, and all the information I found out about, even Ike being briefed that a descendant would come in, and just a lot of, when I went to a clairvoyant institute, all the past lives I worked, they were like, well, you were his spirit guide in World War II, and he's your spirit guide now, and your history is huge. With a lot of the family members and a lot of people that feel affinity and familiarity, because we're a global family. This is not just like some excluded bloodline. This is all of us, all about unity consciousness, all about how we're all connected in this sort of way, and how what we want, he wanted, and we are all leaders in doing this. And some of his quotes are amazing. Like, to put it all on one person or expect one leader to do all this is ridiculous, And he had a lot of amazing quotes talking about, the greatest detriment of these times, because somebody was channeling it and it seemed very accurate, is that some of these starseed missions or people, whatever you want to call it, just people that have a planetary calling, they kind of give up on themselves, or they feel defeated, or they just don't go into that activation mode. They're afraid of what people think. They're afraid of being made fun of. And a lot of us have dealt with that kind of persecution or ostracization, but we still are here. And regardless of what people think, we know that we're doing this on behalf of the whole of humanity, no matter how much it's kind of a thankless thing when it comes to them. And they feel threatened, they feel uncomfortable, but we unconditionally love them through it, and eventually they'll realize that this is a reunion, this is a wake-up, not to some outer information, but to who you truly are, so that you can remove yourself from these forces that are compromising you, and you can realize that, like, you're not just awakening to this stuff or thinking it's conspiracy theory. You have to adopt some outside belief system. You're waking up to what your true potential is and how we've been robbed from understanding who we really are, what our galactic history is, and where we can possibly head in the future. Because we're the most advanced technology, and there's going to be highly advanced technologies that are going to support us, but we have to know the difference between ones and who they're coming from, and any kind of disclosure that might be a false disclosure, anything that might have a fake element to it. And we know that some of those things might not even bother manifesting, because as we break free from it, they're unable to really do the next wave of whatever tactic they want to use to kind of hold us down in a lower vibration. Once we are privy to it and we wake up to it, that relationship is now gone. We've gotten the divorce. Even if they want us to still fill out paperwork and show up in court and deal with like the hassle of it all, we have freed ourselves. And the synchronicities and magic and flow of our lives is going to take us to soul family, true love, and a true love experience with creation, where we experience that, you know, that integration of polarity and that major like tranquility and bliss that comes so naturally, that people feel lost from. That's why people do substances or have vices. They're like, I want that feeling again. Where did it go? You know, we can do it organically and naturally. But it's a bit of a process right now to unplug, unhook, deprogram, overcome the attacks, overcome the traumas. But we all have each other's back, and we're going to do it together no matter what it takes. And that's why I love coming to these kind of places, because I really feel that. And I feel totally at home. And I'm so glad that they've invited me back every year since 2011. I always feel so honored and humbled to just, because I'm, you know, the kid at the table, like, just shut up, you know, like, interrupt, like, and to just have the ability to express anything is very surreal. I don't think I'll ever get used to it or take it for granted. So I appreciate everybody just taking me seriously or giving me the time of day for as long as I've been doing this kind of work. So thank you. Yeah. And I learned, I mean, like, everybody's like a fascinating book, and I've learned so much and been so activated and been able to heal so much from what I've learned about your stories and your truth and your, I mean, some of the comments I get, I'm just like, man, the brilliance and just the awareness, and it's just like, I get so much, I've been able to heal so much and overcome so much because of, you know, your particular calling. It's like, I'm not just up here on stage, it's just like, you're just as much, I mean, we're all, you know, doing this, and it's important that, you know, that's why I do Zoom meetings. It's just kind of pass it around. Everybody's got a story. Everybody's going through something. And I want to have a retreat center, healing center, that we can just come and unwind. And if we need to move or transition out of a job or relationship, we have some place to just kind of catch our breath and look at what resources are available so that we can move and help, like, you know, move a person in a better direction without that feeling of, oh my God, I'm screwed, or like there's no like-minded people around. And so my website, cosmicguide.org, will give updated information about one subscription thing I'll have, which is a weekly show, Zoom meetings, discounted astrological, medical astrology sessions, and so, you know, the occasional 15-minute call. You know, and I know sometimes I reschedule or I, like, you know, things get a little crazy, but my book's almost done, and I'm going to be able to take it to the next level as far as what I'm able to do with subscribers. But everybody who's supported me so far, I wouldn't be able to do this. I wouldn't have been able to get my book out because, you know, this is what I do full time now. Anyway, so this initiatory time, I mean, even Pluto rules viruses and pathogens, right? But that's when we're lodged in the birth canal, when we're kind of feeling like stuck. You know, we're very susceptible to kind of like the flies, you know, just things like kind of taking advantage of disempowerment, trauma, confusion, being disorientated, being in like anger, grief, just all these things that like we haven't fully moved through. But this is our opportunity to raise our vibration beyond any kind of bioweapon, any kind of virus, any kind of like pathogen, any kind of like outer toxicity that gets into our bodies, and continue the process of moving through the birth canal to be the phoenix that's rising, to be the butterfly emerging from the cocoon, instead of building a prison around the cocoon and being like, I can't get out because I'm afraid. I'm afraid of my power. I'm afraid to face death. But when we do, we really get our power back. And that's why I focus a lot on the archetypes of the underworld, Hecate, you know, Persephone getting abducted and coming back out in the spring, the Magdalene energy, the Inanna energy going through the 7 gates of hell, how that corresponds with our chakra, how it corresponds with how we're living these myths without really realizing it every day. You know, and the 9 to 5 or just like being busy all the time or like watching TV and being on our devices sometimes makes us forget. And that's why it's sometimes important to just be like, all right, I'm going on a road trip, I'm getting the F out of here. And that's why I lived on the road for like 10 years, even more. Because I'm like, I can't process all this and like go into, because I can't call in sick and be like, I'm in the underworld right now dealing with like dark overlords. I mean, can I just like have like a break like for a week? I have to do this, it's really important. It's like, no. But, you know, I'm like, I have a strong work ethic. But it's like, no, I can live on the road. I have a wilderness education and survival background, and I thrive in that environment. When you don't know what the next meal is going to be, when you don't know, it's so nice to just be at the mercy of your connection with spirit, because our perception is everything. Every time I was like in poverty consciousness, or I'm screwed, or like, how am I going to like survive? And I got 2 kids, like, how am I going to eat tomorrow? It was just like I just attracted darker energies and things that just like weren't encouraging. Things almost got worse. But then I was like, what are you thinking? You know? what was it like when you were in the wilderness, and you had to just drink water out of like a crack in like, the desert that, it had a bunch of amoebas floating and you just put the iodine stuff in to kill it and you didn't get sick and, even the rattlesnakes were being cool and the scorpions, it's just like, he's like, where are you? You know what to do. So I shift my perspective and everything changed. I was like, I'm abundant. I'm exactly where I need to be. And I trust myself. I trust something greater. And that's when things fell into place. I pulled money out of the ground when I needed it. I met the right people. I found the right connections. I felt safe. And everything fell into line to help me to do the work that I do. And this was my whole adult life, pretty much until, recently. I mean, I did have a lot of rentals, and I've lived all over the country, between, having to, move and, and 2 kids, so I won't even go there. And I know a lot of people have this kind of path, but now I'm in Montana, and I'm grounded. And after a lot of really, really gnarly breakups and dealing with plants and Mars recruitments and all this kind of stuff, and I say a lot, like, he's a saint, because I've had to interrogate him. Are you sure you're not a CIA agent? Like, do you really love me? He's like, and because he's been following me since the beginning, he's like really patient. He's like, no, I know. It's like, you're traumatized, and it's like totally reassuring. But I got remarried. He pulled me out of one of the worst situations with no strings attached, and I was just like, do you want some string? Because I really love you, and you're really cool. And I'm like, we've been married ever since. So, which is great. And my boys are doing good, and we have animals, and it's just like, wow. If you told me 10 years ago that this was all going to happen, when you hit those times you want to give up, or you're just like, am I going to endlessly be screwed and be sabotaged? Is this never going to end? I'm so grateful that I can look at my life and say, yes, it did end. Even though there's maybe looping trauma and doubt about it, I know it's ended, and I know it can end for anybody who's going through similar. And that's why I'm glad I've lived the life that I have, because I'm not just like, oh yeah, it's so idealistic. I understand the planetary alignments. I understand what we're capable of. And everybody's the chosen one. Love and wisdom is the chosen one. All these sort of battles and wars and galactic wars, very territorial kind of things, we have all these energies. And even the reptilian agenda, we're healing our negative ego and how our negative ego has addicted us to this matrix where the reptilian part of our brain is activated. We have to turn our negative ego around, turn that pentagram upright again, and align our ego, our solar plexus, our power center with our soul, with spirit, so that we can generate through our self-identity the embodied spiritual path that we live and walk on a daily basis, and self-correct every time we might fall or stumble, but we're devoted and committed, just like how we survive marriages and commitments, the ones we really want to be in, through the thick and thin, through whatever, we went to hell and back and we're all the stronger for it. That is the kind of relationship we can have with our life journey, to have the reward eventually of feeling that support, that security, and that love and devotion, because spirit, the mother energy, the Christ consciousness, it's unconditional. It'll love us through everything and forgive us. But we have to forgive ourselves and learn how to self-correct so that we can enjoy the abundance that it brings, and divorce the imposters once and for all, so that we can have the divine future that we all deserve, and our divine birthright. And know that this time is to switch that on. And that the adversities can be blessings in disguise. It doesn't make it excusable, the evils and crimes against humanity, because it has gone too far. But we can leverage it so that the weapons become tools for growth, and we de-weaponize it with the power of our mind and the frequency of love, so that we can turn lead into gold and dismantle and neutralize whatever attempt that they're using on us, regardless of where it's coming from, because they're hitting us at every level and all angles. Remove ourselves from that so the purification can happen. And then the earth responds to us. We begin to see a higher earth energy. The DNA switches on, so we have no choice but to see a higher earth energy present itself. We're grounded with the earth. We're the tree of life template. The branches are out into the cosmos, the creative imagination, where the seeds of our higher consciousness and the things that we want to manifest and dream and envision for ourselves. We plant in the womb, in the dark, in the soil, to generate new life, so that we're no longer in the duality of light versus dark. We're embracing the light and dark within, and there's nothing creepy and horrible hiding in the dark, and we're not just in a false light kind of program or an idealistic sort of maybe new age deception. But we forgive ourselves and we just kind of laugh it off and say, whoop, what was I thinking? We all have, had to self-correct and be like, whoa, yeah. And just claim it right now in the here and now. Every moment we have that opportunity and chance, with no shame or blame or guilt about it, because we have been messed with for so freaking long, and we should just celebrate the fact that we're done, and we're all going to help each other get to the next level. So I'm happy about that. And so, yeah, all these different indications, and I've got pictures, you know, of the Venus transits forming a perfect pentagram, the Sophionic corrections, and all the things that have been going on with the 13th sign, and, you know, how this, you know, connects to the planetary grid network, our DNA, our chakra system, our ability to access galactic chakras. And, you know, and we all have a different way maybe of putting it, but we're all kind of saying the same thing. So my version of it might not be the same as yours, but as long as like this can activate, well, what does it mean to you, and what is your truth? That is your sovereign truth frequency, and it's important that we own it, because that truth frequency will sustain you. It'll help you recover from illness, injury, and all sorts of things. And Sean David Morton is a perfect example of being able to come out of adversity, and here he is with us. It's a miracle that this man is here, so I just say hi. Yeah, sorry, but yeah. These are the examples of like the power of the human spirit. And I knew that, alternative four, it doesn't need a label. We all know that deep down. That's why we have the inspiration to wake up the next day or the next morning and still not necessarily fight, but seek that which we are truly capable of doing and own it in the now, so that we can manifest in every moment something better than the bullshit script we've been given and write a better one. So I think my time is up, so I think I'll just leave it at that. My website's cosmicguide.org, everybody, and I look forward to my book being published and seeing you at future events. So thanks, everybody. Oh, you'll see. It's almost like I don't want to say it in case it might change.
Anybody wants a copy of the DVD of this? Come out and see me in the hallway. We'll sit down.
Yeah, thanks.
A very quick question. That was amazing. Is Kimberly Morgan for real?
I don't know. I just don't know who's real and who's not.
Okay. No, but do you know who she is?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've never talked to her directly, so unless I get like a one-on-one kind of feel, it's like I hear all sorts of things like good and not good, but it's just like, well, you know, until I meet her myself, I really wouldn't know.
Okay. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Oh, cool. You're welcome.